O Spirit of Advent and Christmas past, prepare in us an expectant heart. Thaw the wintry coldness of our ways. Help us not refuse those waiting birth. And teach us that Bethlehem is not a town, past or present, but a place in our hearts where the cry of the newborn baby can be heard.
The chalice will now be lit in the sanctuary. If you have your own chalice, please light it now too, and let us know that you've done.
You want to see the whole clip again, Josh?
No, we're good. Thank you, Monica. Waiting is not something we're particularly known for in our culture. Yet Advent is precisely that, the season of waiting. This month, we begin an exploration of the theme of stillness. Stillness is that silent half second before something happens. It's the quiet of a winter's evening when the new fallen snow is on the ground. Stillness is that pause when our heartbeat quickens just before we tear open the first present of the season. Stillness is a moment of anticipation. It is the spirit of Advent. There are many holidays this time of year, so many that it's hard to explore them all in a Unitarian Universalist church. Next Sunday, we will get into Hanukkah and the Jewish tradition. And of course, we will dive headlong into Christmas and Christianity on Christmas Eve. But before all of that comes, there is a moment, a pause of stillness that is Advent. And one of the holidays that we pass through on that long Advent road is today, actually, December 6th, which is the Feast of St. Nicholas, Santa Claus, as we know him. Now, the real St. Nicholas of Myra was a bishop in Asia Minor, what we now call the country of Turkey. He himself was Greek. He spoke out against heretics, including us Unitarians in the early days. He was known for giving gifts unexpectedly to those who needed them, including children and sailors for whom he is the patron saint. It was the unexpected gift giving that prompted Christians in Europe to give small gifts to children on his feast day or the evening before. In Germany, they eat Stollen on the Feast of St. Nicholas, a kind of fruitcake with marzipan in it. St. Nicholas in Dutch is Sinterklaas, from which we get the name Santa Claus. So this morning, I want to talk a bit about Santa Claus. Jesus gets his due on the 25th, so let's give Santa his on the 6th. Now, I am a parent, and I know that there's a lot of parents out there who watch this broadcast and the video later. Maybe you do so with your kids. We love intergenerational worship at our congregation. And if you do, I just want to give a little public service announcement that this sermon has some spoilers in it, and this might be a good one for the little ones to skip if you want Santa's magic to work. And if you're an adult, we'll be talking about the true meaning of Santa Claus, which may be somewhat different than what you expect. Now, a lot of what we know, or think we know about Santa, comes from this morning's reading of Visit from St. Nicholas. That poem sets up the Santa Claus canon, if you will. It describes what he looks like and what his reindeer are called. It really is kind of the starting point for Santa as an iconic figure, both embodying the spirit of giving and generosity, as well as a capitalistic branding. Now, in the poem, it is adults, not kids, who witness Santa. This is interesting because we usually think of kids being the believers in Santa Claus. But here in this most famous poem, we have an adult witness to who Santa is and what he does. Now, this would prove to be most unusual because later on, Santa does his work in secret. For that matter, the poem does not question the existence of Santa Claus. There is no explanation or apology for him. The description of what he looks like, his words, his actions are without irony or doubt. It is a poem, and the descriptions are quite colorful, so one hesitates to say that it's matter-of-fact account, but this is Santa as told to us by an adult observer and believer, plain and simple. Now, I'm going to call a Visit from St. Nicholas Phase 1 belief in Santa Claus. Phase 1 is a child's unquestioning belief that Santa exists. He is a given, and rooted in innocence and joy at life and wonder. Phase 2, we might label as doubt or questioning at the very least. Again, I'm very sensitive to any kids that may be in the room right now, so it could be a good time to go in the other room and watch Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer or something like that. Reverend Josh gives you permission to skip this part of the sermon if you want to. Anyway, it's hard to know when this stage comes along exactly. For some kids, it happens in the tween years. For others, accidents can happen when they learn the truth earlier. I remember my brother getting a big toy set one year from Santa Claus, and then a couple of days after Christmas, I saw the box that it had come in laying in our basement, and the spell was broken for me. My boys are 11 and 14 this year, and pandemic willing, they will spend it here where I spent so many Christmases growing up. I've not spent a Christmas day with my family of origin in 20 years, so I'm very excited to have my sons be here with me. To be perfectly honest, I am not sure where they stand with Santa Claus. I know my oldest son, Thomas, believed in Santa Claus for a long time, to the point where, as a father, I got a little concerned. Are his skills at asking questions of the world around him where they need to be? Show me a little bit more critical thinking here, bud. So I make these little jokes, kind of pointing out that Santa's making a video game that has Nintendo's brand on it. Surely he'd get sued for licensing infringement for building something like that, wouldn't he? He must have a team of really talented elf lawyers that keep the corporate powers that be away from him. Well, they just sort of roll their eyes, as they do with most of my silly dad jokes. Finally, a couple years ago, I just asked Thomas flat out, "Do you believe in Santa?" He said yes. Why? I asked. Because one year Santa got us an Xbox, and I know you and Mom are way too cheap to buy us something like that. Turns out his logic is impeccable. Now that is a powerful myth. Myths are stories or narratives that help us make sense of the world. Now some of them may be true, such as the earth revolves around the sun. That's part of our worldview, right? It so happens that that particular story comes from science and not religion, which is why religion has felt threatened by science, because science tells us things about the world when before only religion told us things about the world. Religion is a complex system of symbols that, according to the anthropologist Clifford Geertz, acts to establish long-lasting moods and motivations in people and clothes those moods with an air of realism, which is just a fancy way to say myths are very compelling. They speak to our heart and our soul, not just to our mind. Religion isn't simply what you believe about the world. Religion is a highly complex pattern of symbols that helps us make meaning out of the world, whether those stories are true or not. The stories might be about Buddha or Muhammad or Jesus, and yes, even Santa Claus. If a visit from St. Nicholas is the story about phase 1 belief, then A Miracle on 34th Street is a story about phase 2 doubt. The whole movie turns on this very question, which we saw in the video. Is Kris Kringle the real Santa Claus? Susie, the little girl, believes he is. Mrs. Walker, her mother, as we saw, doubts it very much. Eventually, there's even a trial to see if there is really a Santa Claus. Facts are presented on one side and the other, and there can only be one right answer. Is Santa true or not? Now, I suppose in the conventional sense of that question, we might say that there is not. Some would sacrifice a world full of meaning for a world full of fact. Indeed, the history of Western civilization since the Enlightenment has been the steady march of fact over meaning until we arrive at a worldview without meaning but lots of data. I was there for a very long time. I didn't believe in Santa for a quite long time. He was a symbol that I had sacrificed in order to live in a world filled with facts and reason. The theologian Paul Tillich is one of my intellectual heroes. Tillich was a Lutheran theologian in the 20th century. And as a young man, he served as a chaplain in the German army during World War I, and later would see what his country did in World War II. And as a result of those experiences, Paul Tillich had a crisis of faith. He became interested in what we call existentialism, a branch of philosophy that asks questions of why we exist and what meaning our existence has. Tillich questioned the existence of God and the meaning of the Christian faith. He was marred in phase 2 doubt, so much so that he found himself living in a world without meaning, a worldview in which all the symbols that Clifford Geertz writes about no longer had any power. Another existentialist, Albert Camus, called this the absurd. And so Tillich set out studying symbols, particularly how symbols work in religion. In his book, The Courage to Be, Tillich notes that we are presented with an image of God as an old man in the sky, or even as a young man in the form of Jesus. And we're told fantastic stories about this God, myths, some might say. And some people live and die having known nothing else. And then at a certain point, science and the Enlightenment started asking questions about this God. Critical thinking developed, and people started disbelieving in this image of God. They became atheists. And many people lived and died, having never known anything other than a universe devoid of meaning. However, Tillich says, there is a phase 3. That initial image of God as the old man in the sky was wrong, he says, and the atheists were right to question it. We would do well to clear it out of our heads. He even goes so far as to call it an idol. An idol for Tillich is when we mistake the infinite for the finite. We think something small is actually everything. But, he says, there is a God that emerges when that first God is swept away. So phase 3 belief we will call the courage to be. Now, it's hard to describe the God that appears after God has disappeared in the anxiety of doubt, as Tillich puts it. And frankly, the guy starts sounding a lot like a Buddhist Zen master in his attempt to describe this new understanding of God as the ground of all being. I remember a professor of mine saying that calling God the ground of all being left him pretty cold. There aren't any symbols or images for this because they've all been stripped away, at least for us. So maybe it makes sense to flip over to Buddhism for a little while, see if their symbols might help us out, at least for a little bit. Pure Land Buddhism is a tradition that is maybe not so well known in America, but it's actually the most popular branch of Buddhism practiced in China. Now, without going into it too much, it's a form of Buddhism that is very devotional, and its main practice involves chanting the name of Amitabha Buddha, or Amida in Japanese. And the general thought is that by chanting, "Hail to Amida Buddha," that Amida, who lives in the land of bliss, will take you there when you die so that you can become a Buddha too. Our world is too messed up and it's too hard to attain enlightenment here. So we have to rely on Amida to come and help us out. Now that's the traditional view. That's the basic set of symbols that the Pure Land Buddhists are working with. Those symbols, as Clifford Geertz would say, act to establish long-lasting moods and motivations that seem uniquely realistic. But, even Pure Land Buddhists have to deal with science and nature at some point. Modern practitioners of that faith take a less literal, a more figurative approach to Amida and his Pure Land. Maybe, these more modern believers assert, maybe Amida is not literally a guy in the Western paradise. Maybe Amida, whose name means the Buddha of infinite light and life, is here with us now. Amida is, to quote some of the Pure Land masters, infinite caring, immeasurable understanding, the universe that surrounds and sustains us. One practitioner of Pure Land once said that, "I think of Amida Buddha as Santa Claus." And his minister was like, "What? Really? You think of Amida Buddha as Santa Claus?" He's like, "Yeah, when I was a kid, I believed that there was a person called Santa Claus. And then when I got older, I no longer believed in Santa Claus." Now that I'm a father, I know I am Santa Claus. Amida is like that. We are Amida to each other. We are immeasurable love and infinite understanding to and for each other. My friends, we are collectively Santa Claus. We are collectively God or Jesus. That love and compassion lives in our hearts, and it's made real by what we do for and to each other. Just as the Pure Land Buddhists are Amida to each other, you too are we, so too are we all Santa Claus. I saw this fellow on YouTube tell the story of doing the Santa thing for his daughters. And he would go all out. I mean, making videos purporting to be security footage of Santa coming into their house. Really the extra mile. And then finally, his oldest daughter figured it out, confronted him on the so-called truth of Santa Claus, and his response was perfect. It has been such a joy to get to be Santa Claus for you. Now you get to join me and have the pleasure of being Santa with us for your sister. And while it might not be a play or a movie, the image of Santa Claus in Phase 3, The Courage to Be, or maybe we want to call it Phase 3, Amida Santa Claus, comes from that famous editorial, Yes, Virginia, There Is a Santa Claus. In it, Francis Church writes, all minds, Virginia, whether they be men's or children's, are little. In this great universe of ours, man is a mere insect, an ant in his intellect, as compared with the boundless world about him, as measured by the intelligence capable of grasping the whole of truth and knowledge. Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. He exists as certainly as love and generosity and devotion exist. And you know that they abound and give to your life its highest beauty and joy. This Advent and this Christmas, we'll all have plenty of opportunities to be Santa Claus for each other. When you have one of those rare opportunities of stillness, imagine yourself as Saint Nick. Embody the generosity and the sense of surprise and wonder that the real Saint Nicholas and his 20th century counterpart, Santa Claus, both promote. Have a slice of stolen, and may the symbol of Santa Claus live in your heart all of your days. I love you. Go in peace and love. Amen. I invite you now to join in singing hymn number 226, People Look East. The words will appear on your screen. May the love of this season be with you through all the days of the year and give you strength and courage and faith. May the peace of this season be ever in you and bring you comfort and hope. May the light of this season shine in your heart and bring you happiness and laughter. May the joy that is in you be shared with others.